everybody. It's so nice to be here. I'm so excited to be joined by this panel of amazing builders and leaders working on productivity with AI and in the enterprise. I was thinking backstage, we should have a jar every time enterprise is said, and we should put a penny in and then buy ourselves something nice today. But I have here on the panel, and I'm using my notes so I get it exactly right. We have Christina, the COO of Linear, which is a purpose-built system for planning and building products, which I love and use. So Christina, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
We have Quinn from the CEO and daily committer. I like that that's in the very upfront part of the, top, are you top committer or just daily?
No, not top.
Okay, so daily frequency, but not volume. On AMP, the frontier coding agent that shipped, we love it, we're talking about it today, the ad-supported free mode last week. So get your code with a side of DevTools ads. And SourceGraph code search for the companies that run the world, including JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Palantir, OpenAI, Stripe, Uber, and I quote again, and so on. And then we have Dani Grant, CEO of Jam, the company helping hundreds of thousands of engineers, including me, fix more than 10 million bugs faster. So we have a great group here to talk about enterprise productivity, AI, interesting go-to-market models, and what we're really seeing being adopted in teams that are trying to use these tools to make things better. So first, usually I close with a lightning round question, but I actually want to start with one, which is really quick from each of you. How do you define enterprise? And then how do the teams that you sell to define productivity? And I bet we'd have different answers. So Christina, I'd love to hear what you think.
I would say there's what is your sales team divided by answer, which I'm not going to give. But I think about it as a company that is quite large, maybe 1,000 employees and above, that operates in a more old school fashion. And then your second part of your question
is how are they defining productivity right now?
I would say for a lot of them, it's ultimately outcome-based. Do they feel that they're shipping more? A lot of these companies, especially the older school enterprise ones, don't really use a lot of tools or think about this in terms of metrics, but we're also trying to help change that.
Yep. So shipping more, velocity. Quinn, what about you? How do you define, because I think you might have a different, I don't know, maybe you have the same definition of enterprise and productivity.
Yeah, for enterprise, we define it as when there's someone who's picking the tools for other people, and it's not just each person picks their own tools. And productivity, they don't know how to define productivity. It's the age-old question, and they need whoever is selling them that tool to define it for them, especially in this new world.
The only thing I'll add is oftentimes we'll see companies are more vibe-based when it comes to productivity, even in these large organizations where you think they really have their skis on. But more and more we're talking to teams where they have put together internal, call it builder tools teams, or they'll call it a developer velocity team. And once you have a team in place, then you want to measure the success of the team. So they start to put together KPIs like latency between committing code to the code being in production, time between a PR being created and when it has eyes on it, the number, throughput of PRs, percentage of PRs where there's an AI co-author. And so that's one interesting trend that we're seeing.
Yeah. Quinn, I have a question for you because I think, what Christina said, we hear a lot, just velocity, product velocity. And I think there's this promise of agentic coding and AI copilots for coding, where the promise is you're going to get velocity. You're not just going to get more code, you're going to get higher quality products in the hands of your customers, more innovation. Do you feel like enterprises are really bought in to that being the outcome of these tools? Is there still skepticism? How are, especially engineering teams, which I think you have a unique point of view on, where are they in their mindset now, especially as, Christina said, in these older companies that maybe have not adopted these tools before and are looking at them in the last year?
They're all over the map. I think the scariest and most interesting thing for me is we see that I would guess probably 80% of people who use agentic coding tools are getting net negative value from them. And that's pretty humbling for someone who builds them. 20% know how to use it. Maybe it's less than 20%, and they get a ton of value out of it. But when you're thinking about an enterprise, well, a lot of enterprises probably are getting net negative value from them, and things are changing so fast. So there's a huge responsibility for us and other people building these tools to help enterprises use them right and to be honest about what's going on.
Christina, you're nodding. I'm curious what help you think those enterprises actually need when transforming either how they do the work or just effective use of these new capabilities.
I think they really need to understand like what the ROI is and like what the value is and how to get to it. I mean, I think there's this classic of like, oh, this tool isn't working for me. And it's like, well, you're prompting it wrong and like you don't know how to do that. And it's like, well, maybe that's a product problem. Maybe that's your problem. Like, and in Linear's case, that would be our problem, right? If it feels like you're using some of these tools and they're not coming up with like the right outcome. We were actually talking about this backstage where it's like what do you call like the smallest increment of like work on Linear? Like, is it a task? Is it an issue? Is it a ticket? And so sometimes like on certain tools that you see out there, they define it one way. And so what do I have to call this in this tool in order for it to start doing the work, right? And I think in a lot of ways, we have to get back to the mode where there was like a lot of help in using some of these tools versus expectation that the customer is going to figure it out. Because I think in AI in particular, we've kind of been used to the fact that you could start using a product and it kind of doesn't work so well. And then that customer will like come back to you 3 months later and try it again and somehow it's better. Whereas before it was like, you had your one shot with that customer and if it didn't work, they're never coming back again. And so like, I would like us to return to like thinking that like if you don't get it right the first time, it's not going to go well. And I think that means that you have to have a higher bar in terms of like onboarding and like the full end-to-end quality of your product.
Yeah, and talking about onboarding, I'm wondering about the other kind of bookend to the experience, which is Dani referenced sort of vibe-based productivity evaluation. You have a lot of data in your product about throughput of issues. Do you feel like teams are doing quantifiable measurement of velocity, or is it still, my experience, I don't know if it's any of your experience, like we feel like things are faster, we feel like things are moving smooth. Like where are maybe your customers on the spectrum of, I just need to feel like productivity happens, and maybe Quinn, to your point, is actually not happening, versus I really want to put numbers and pen to paper and figure out, before times and after times, am I really getting efficiencies?
Yeah. A good example of this is, like I would say, we tend to run Linear pilots with our larger customers who are going through our sales process. And maybe some of those larger customers operate on like a vibes basis of like, does this feel right? Does this feel like we're moving faster? But even if that's how they operate, we really encourage them to collect as much data and use data in their decision-making process, because often the person you're talking to who thinks they're decision maker may not be the ultimate decision maker. And so the pilot's done, and then some executive comes along and is like, well, give me the ROI of switching to Linear, right? So for us, I think it's much more about how do you, for example, start with like a survey of your customers. And in our case, it's like, how many people are running this pilot? Like, if it's 50 people internally, let's have them run a survey before they start the pilot on like what their previous tool was, and then after the pilot with Linear. And then you can just see like qualitative data around like, do people feel like it's easier to find an issue, understand a project, file, and complete an issue on our platform. And then separately from that, if you are importing data from a previous tool, which typically you are if you want to have all of your historical data while you're running the pilot, we can understand like if you were, for example, on Jira and you were creating an issue at one point and then completing it 2 weeks later, like roughly, if you look at the team over a 30-day period, are they starting and completing issues faster on our platform? And then we'll share that data back with them. Of course, like they may not trust us, right, with that data. So we always encourage them to like run their own analysis, get the data from the API and do that themselves. But that's another piece where I think, for larger deals in particular, like we should be the trusted party to get that data back to our customers.
Well, and Dani, what I wanted to say to you is I think you have a different purview on productivity, which is you have this accrued overall productivity through like micro efficiency on any one bug. And so your value proposition, I'm going to speak for you a little bit, is like, get more information better on bugs so your team can help fix issues faster. And so you're really trying to pitch the efficiency at an individual developer or user perspective. How do you think about that sort of micro productivity, that little bit?
One of the things that customers that start using Jam experience almost immediately is before using Jam, if a customer reported a bug to them, they would need to ask them a bunch of questions, go back and forth. 3 days later, they're like, oh, wait, also, can you answer this question? Is it still happening? And it's so awkward and it feels bad. And so one of the most immediate effects they see is, well, they no longer have to go and ask follow-up questions to the customers. And so it's not a measurable productivity, but it feels a lot better to be the customer, and it feels a lot better to be on the team supporting them, right? And so, yeah, it's tricky. One interesting thing that we've been seeing sort of separately is the reason why the vibes plus measurement is so impactful is because sometimes when you measure the AI productivity, there are other side effects happening that that wouldn't show up in your measurements. So, for example, I was talking to an engineering leader the other day where they're measuring PR throughput. And the quantity of PRs from junior engineers has gone way up. They're committing so much more code. But when you ask the senior engineers what's happening, they are getting bogged down in reviewing so much code. They're like avalanched. And so I think we're sort of seeing you need the vibes too.
You need vibes and numbers. So that's and then I say, as I joke, every time a tool ships a dashboard of usage in their app, an enterprise rep gets their wings. So, yes, it's good to be able to talk to your customers about before and after surveys, but put it in your product and show them. That can be one of the most important things to do for an enterprise product. And, speaking of, Quinn, I'm curious about your point of view here, which is, you're in like a slightly competitive space. I don't know.
Just a little bit.
They're like
Coding
a couple
agents.
players. It's like moderately hot. And but it's been a space that has at least had some mainstream attention for a little bit here. And we're probably on, year 1 or year 2 of teams like really trying out these systems. And I'm curious from your point of view, earlier on, I would say 23, 24, 25, everybody's like, just try something, figure out what works, let's figure out this space, we can be very experimental. Do you feel like companies are moving past the just try it phase and starting to think about, okay, what's the tool we're going to use? How are we going to consolidate? How are we going to simplify? And how does that impact how you think about your product?
Yeah, everyone is sick and tired of coding agents being so noisy. There's so many of them, it's so competitive, and there's so many companies that say, we're just going to finally pick the one, because now we've tried 3 and they become obsolete. But joke's on them, I'm sorry, but the technology is changing so fast, and it's not realistic to say that you can pick one. And if you try to do that back in April, maybe you picked Cursor, and then Claude Code and AMP came out, and Codex, and it's just not possible given that the tech is moving so fast. And I think the difference between our businesses, Linear, which is a system of record, amazing product. Hopefully you don't have every single person in your team using a different issue tracker and you're not switching every 6 months. In that case, everything you said makes total sense for your business. It makes sense for our code search business. You don't have more than one code search. But if you have a coding agent, you got to be moving fast. And anything from the customer that's like, we want to run a 4-month evaluation and get numbers, we've seen those, we've participated in those, and we feel it no longer serves the customer. It's hilarious how everything changes at the end versus what you thought was going to go on at the beginning. So stuff is not slowing down at all.
Yeah.
One thing we're seeing is, while on the engineering side, I think there's a lot less, let's just try everything, like a little bit more maturity. Outside of engineering, one big shift that we're seeing in every conversation is that every function is somehow becoming a product builder. And it's really cool. And so for these functions, they're sort of new to the AI coding agent, AI software space. And so they're in a much more, let's try it. It's like we're almost entering a new wave.
I think that's really true. So let's talk about designing products, because I think what's really interesting about this moment, again, this dynamic that you always see in enterprise, which is like, who's your real buyer, who's your real decision maker, and also if at the end of the day your users aren't using your product, you're cooked. And so I'm curious how, Christina, maybe Linear balances the top-down mandate. You have a single source of truth. You're not going to be running 2 or 3 in parallel. It makes zero sense. You really have to make a decision with winning the hearts and minds of I love you all, very opinionated engineers who want, this particular tool. I have never heard of an engineer that did not have strong opinions about whatever issue tracking tool was imposed upon them is the word I would use. So I'm curious, and I think you all, more than many companies, address this at a product level. So I'm curious how you think about designing for the enterprise where both of those stakeholders really matter to you.
Yeah, I think we started as a business primarily focused on the individual contributor, and I think that was coming from a place of like where our founders found themselves at, right? They were at all of these companies where someone comes in eventually and is like, we have to impose this tool, and they came out and were like, we hate this. This is terrible. We don't want to use this. There must be something better. And then you realize there isn't anything better, and so they choose to build linear instead. I think what's like a really exciting piece of that is, you can start in companies that are really motivated because there's an individual contributor who really cares, and also the power of the developer is, I think, stronger than ever. So you have, for example, a very senior principal, staff engineer, what have you, who says, hey, I want to try this for my team or my org, and we're special, so I want to try linear. And, we can close this off to our team and still figure out how to collaborate with other people, and let's do that. And often those people will get permission to use our product. So for us, it's actually good that for a lot of companies, you don't have to mandate a single tool across the organization. And that's where we start. So we'll start with tons of companies. I think OpenAI was a great example of this, where we started with, I think, less than 100 seats with them, and now rolled out over 2,000 seats in the organization. So we really start with just get the land. We don't need to fight for the entirety of this company right now. If people try the product, they will get it, and then we can get that expansion over time. And so for, I would say, the vast majority of our large accounts, that's really how it's worked well for us. And I think also with enterprise, you tend to find that the IT persona or your CISO persona or what have you starts to get more comfortable with the idea of linear once it's actually in the organization, even at a small scale, and then rolling it out more widely. So for us, it's kind of you're putting linear in baby mode or something within a company, and then expanding over time. And so I think in general that works really well for us, and it's been a strategy for us really since the beginning.
One thing I would love for you to speak on relative to that is backstage we were talking about how design and marketing and product decisions get made inside linear, and I think they're made with a very opinionated lens. If you have not used the product, is quite beautiful. How do you internally and as an organization, as a culture, resist the urge of the enterprise customization we just had? It seems like you stayed really anchored in the IC even when you've gone up from everything from how you market to how you build the product. How do you preserve that as a culture?
Yeah, I think it's really focusing on, how can you release something that is not just useful to the enterprise decision maker, the leader within a company, but also to the individual. So for example, we launched dashboards, just as you described. We made it only available on our enterprise plan, so it was very much focused on the enterprise customer. But when we focused on our launch, we said, okay, we're going to talk about the dashboards that you as an individual contributor might want to have to focus on your own individual work and output. And then also the dashboard you might want to have for your 5-person team. And then, if you're an engineering director, what does that look like? So figuring out, is there value that you can have with a given feature that actually goes across the org. And I think especially within engineering, we have a lot of features around project updates and initiatives and wide org level planning. And our hope there is that we make those things, of course, for the leaders of the company, they care about that too. But hopefully it means that you as an individual contributor never have to be in one of those god awful meetings that I've been at other companies where you go around and you talk about the top 10 priorities of the company and you're filling out a Google slide. And I'm why am I filling out a Google slide? Don't we have a tool that tracks and manages our work and I can give you an update on it, right? So hopefully there's still value that you can get as the individual contributor who doesn't have to do that stuff anymore. So when we think about marketing and go-to-market generally, it's about there should be a win for everybody in this kind of a release, and that's our hope.
So Quinn, I have a question for you in designing for the enterprise, because I was looking at your list of customers and so on, and you've got, I mean, I've sold to these banks. They are hard to get into. These are not easy organizations either to sell into, to get adoption. A lot of times you're working on legacy tech stacks. I'm curious if there are any product lessons learned building a product that can serve, like what I call super enterprise, which is financial services, regulated industry, really entrenched, sometimes legacy players, which I don't know if any of these are, but just bigger, complicated companies. And what are the product lessons you've taken away from serving those?
Well, the first experience I had in my career, I was at Palantir, and I saw how Alex Karp at Palantir was able to get us direct access to data centers and all the right people in JP Morgan and Bank of America. And once you see that happen in 2 weeks, you know it's possible, and you can't unlearn that. So you're forever impatient. And now I think the world has changed again, where that kind of timeline is not just open to the Palantirs of the world with senators, ex-senators on their board and stuff like that, but to people with a great product. Once you see those kind of companies have lab environments where they can hear about a new AI product and try it the next day, then everything you knew about enterprise, you got to unlearn. We serve most of these on the cloud now with all of their code, and we do a ton to make it secure. But fundamentally, everything has changed now. And with WorkOS, for example, we use WorkOS, we love it. It's everything that Michael said at the keynote is right about how they're willing to try products from companies that have only been around for a year or two. So they have really smart people, they have lab environments, they can try you out, and they've gotten really good at bringing in products that they like and putting them on the fast rails.
So, okay, what I've heard is find the top performers that don't have to follow the vendor rules so you can get wedged in, find the labs team, find the customers and make them happy. I want to pivot a little bit to go to market, which I think this panel has a really interesting point of view on. And Dani, I'm going to start with you, which is how, I think what a lot of us are doing with the products we're building is not only trying to build awesome product that adds value, we're trying to change behavior. And sometimes you don't want to put a credit card between you and behavior change, your customer and behavior change. And so Dani, I'm curious how you've thought about the monetization journey of Jam, especially as it's become apparent you have more and more value in these larger B2B engagements.
A lot of us at Jam are students of Cloudflare. It was the first company I joined out of college. Our head of engineering was employee number, 7 or something, was there through the IPO. And the thing that we saw work really, really well there is they gave away a lot for free. And the reason why that worked is because it built a lot of trust with developers. It said, you can try this, and you can try this, in production pretty heavily, and we know that you're going to have a great experience. The second is it's almost like having free QA for the enterprise customer. So when you have a really large free user base and they're using the product very heavily, they point out issues. Actually, free users are often noisier than paying users. And they point out the issues so that you can fix them so that when you go and sell a bank, their product is even better. And lastly, when you're a small fish and you cater to just a couple customers, it opens some doors, but it also closes some doors to opportunities. And so we saw Cloudflare kind of be this pufferfish in CDN by having just a large user base and being able to change the internet on this scale. And I found that very inspiring. So I wanted us to always think big. How do we help everyone? How do we build for everyone? And then, of course, at some point, we wanted to charge. And we wanted to charge for real companies, not, hobbyist side projects, and I think we're very much on the journey of that. But we did the thing that everyone does, which is we put a paywall and hired a sales team, and so far it's pretty good.
Perfect. And before we get to Q&A, we have to ask Quinn about alternative go-to-market and pricing models for enterprise AI productivity products. So you just recently released AMP Free, sponsored by ads, which I love the idea of a command line ad. I'm not going to lie. That sounds I think they're very cute. They look good. You have to be a good copywriter, which was my first job. So how did you come to this idea? Where did the boldness to actually just go ahead and take what was like kind of a Twitter meme and turn it into a pricing and packaging strategy. And in, the however many days it's been live, what have you learned about that, or what has it opened up for you in terms of how you think about enterprise go-to-market?
It's totally blown me away. And it started out just seeing these customers. They would spend 4 months trying to figure out which coding agent is the best and measuring them all because they're expensive and it's a big decision. And then the tools would be obsolete by the end of that. And that was pretty frustrating for everyone involved. And there is this joke of an idea, hey, why don't we put ads and make it free? For all the same reasons Dani said why free is amazing. And look at Cloudflare, they use free to get in the enterprise. Google uses free to get into the enterprise. All the employees at JP Morgan use google.com and they see ads, and it's not an enterprise agreement, it's free. And once we started joking about it, we laughed and just talked to some other people, and we started to go talk to companies, hey, would you want to advertise? And there was incredible demand for advertising because if you can do it really tastefully, then it's something that developers will go along with. So we launched it last week, and we've just been blown away by, I was surprised that developers were cool with it, and also the advertising demand is off the charts. And what's really cool about that is that means that we can make something that used to be really expensive totally free. And if you've never coded in a way where you don't have to worry about the token costs, let me tell you, when you don't have to worry, it's like really fun. And it also lets us build the kinds of things that we couldn't build if there was like a meter ticking either on our bank account or your bank account. So it's a totally new model. We'll see where it goes, but we're going to expand it even more, make it so you don't need to share data for training, and bring in a lot more advertisers.
Great. So Dani, I want to see mid-screen recording ads, mid-roll ads on your jam. And then let me think for Chris, what do we want in linear? I want every time you close a ticket, we will pop open a Black Friday ad that your boss can buy you a little gift with. So we'll do like an affiliate program. So if you need alternative monetization ideas for your enterprise AI, Claire's your girl. All right, let's open it up, turn on the house lights. Let's get some questions going.
Thanks, guys. How do you guys think about forward deployed engineering and actually deploying your application into enterprise environments?
Yeah, we were talking about this backstage. Christina, Quinn, you probably have some interesting implementation approaches. How do you all think about it?
Yeah, we only recently, even just like thinking about like technical people as part of our sales process, we only recently hired our very first like sales engineer. So even though we have like a pretty technical product we sell to a technical customer, like it is a SaaS product at the end of the day. It's relatively easy to figure out. So we haven't really needed a person until now, as we're starting to work on like larger and larger enterprise deployments. But we really see that person as like more of an enabler versus someone who's going to maybe like Palantir style, like parachute into your company and like work on like your code and like your company and build like maybe bespoke linear API to, some third-party integrations. Like that's not where we're going just yet. So we're leaving that more to our customers to implement on their own. But I could see that changing and evolving depending on the kinds of customers that we want. Like, nothing's off limits, but I think we try to keep it pretty tight on our team so that we don't necessarily have to have that type of motion.
Yeah, I think it's really early with forward deployed engineering on AI products. We've got a small team. It's been really effective, and it's important to not use FDE as a crutch for a product that's bad or hard to deploy. That's a really common crutch to use it as. And if you can help a customer be more successful, so going back to that issue where I think a lot of developers, they do not know how to use coding agents, and if they knew it a week ago, it's going to change in a week. How can you solve that problem inside of customers? That's interesting, but I think it's very early.
Yeah, I have an opinion that all your engineers should be forward deployed, meaning I think more engineers than not should be talking to customers, really understanding the problems that land at your feet, staying really close to the go-to-market and customer-facing teams, maybe even doing a sales call or two. Like, I actually think the culture of a forward-deployed engineering team is really important, whether or not you're doing demo, onboarding, implementation work. I will say I have run for deployed teams in other businesses for actual like large government, large enterprise. And I will tell you, anybody that has the appetite to do it, there is money out there to be made. I was at OpenAI Dev Day, and the OpenAI leadership team told me directly the number one thing underserved by startups right now is like big, meaty, gnarly, not sexy enterprise, like big enterprise problems, which will be solved in some way, shape, or form by companies willing to do the forward deployed model. So I think there's money in the enterprise banana stand for anybody who has the appetite for that. Any other questions?
Hello. I'm curious, is there any kind of like trade-off that you are thinking about, especially with like freemium tiers, where you want to target like power users versus just the general public, and then how that kind of influences how productive people can be? I think that Quinn, you mentioned like the success rate for coding agents is actually pretty low. But are those people that are really deriving benefit from it, are they like power users, or is it just like they know how to use it good enough?
I think there's a high value to being open to learning, and there's a lot of people that read into the model capabilities or the agent capabilities, things that don't exist. So I think people that are generally level-headed and rational, they can get a lot of value out of it. Sometimes people that are too on X or online, they see the repo with like 89 Claude skills and they add all of them and then it junks stuff up. I think what's interesting is, so Mitchell Hashimoto, the HashiCorp co-founder, he uses AMP, and he showed how he fixed that OpenAI Dev Day issue where there was an update notification on your Ramon's screen, and it was kind of embarrassing when using Ghosty. He fixed it with AMP, and it cost him $16 total across like 20 different threads. And I think we could actually make $16 by showing Mitchell ads. So that's the kind of thing that's not that expensive to support. And then there's other people that use it in a way that gets them way less output and costs them $200. And that's a big challenge now. But there are plenty of power users that are a lot cheaper than the people that are not getting value out of it. It's a product problem, though, to Christina's point. It's not, oh, the user's got to figure it out. We want to solve it. And now we have an incentive to solve that for users since we're the ones paying their tokens.
Yeah. We have to hear what Christina says, because unfortunately, I have been a Linear customer for going on 24 months, and I have paid this lady $0 whole American dollars. We're really I told her 2026 is going to be our year. It's going to be our year. But what I think is really valuable is there's this commitment to the long-term play of PLG, and it will pay off, I promise.
Yeah, no, I mean, I also think for example, I think for us, we have a very generous free plan. I think the reason for that is we want people to try and feel the product, and sometimes when some people people on too much on the internet, as Quinn described, might be like, what's this deal with Linear? Why do people like it? And it's just you just try it. And it's free to try, so go do it, right? And I think that makes it easier for people to kind of understand maybe something that is hard to describe or explain with a given developer product. So I think that's very important for us. And then, eventually, as businesses expand, grow, add seats, et cetera, they'll pay us. So we're pretty confident in that. We're a very profitable business. So if Claire gets Linear for free for another year or two, we'll be fine. And in general, I also look at this as lead gen for other reasons. A lot of people use Linear for free for personal tasks, and we know that that user is never going to reach a threshold where they'll pay us. So that is a permanent free user. But that user also probably works at another company. And that company might at some point be saying hey, we're thinking about adopting Linear. And if they already use Linear for a bunch of other stuff, side projects, personal things, and they come back and are oh, I would love to use that at work. That's such a value add for us because they already know how to use their product, our product. They're also going around to a bunch of other different people in their company and being oh, here's how you do this, or here's how you do this. And they're an advocate for us. So there's a lot of value in free users, even when you're talking about an enterprise business like ours, that sells very much B2B.
Well, and we built an integration. So we're a partner, and I go and sing the praises of Linear to a bunch of pod and a bunch of shared customers. I'll add one sort of differing point of view on free customers, which is I run ChatPRD. We've run a lot of tests around monetization, and I've actually found for our format of product, buying is a leading indicator of adoption in a way that's like very margin accretive for us, which means like free customers kick tires and feel no incentive to actually like really go deep in your product, especially onesie, twosie, one-off kind of individual users, of which we have a lot. And so we've actually found that the hard paywall filters out a lot of people who would never become paying customers anyway, and allows us to focus our time and energy on really highly incentivized people. You know, you swipe a credit card, you're going to give it the good old college try. And so we've taken a slightly different approach, but we have a very different business model than all of you. So it's just something to think about. I think your mileage will vary on different projects. Another question?
I wanted to ask a question. I think this came up earlier, this concept of, more PRs are being created, and then we're also going towards a world where they're actually being reviewed by AI. And we're just starting to think about quality. And I'm wondering, in a world in a couple years where volume of PRs is however many more X multiple, how do you imagine measuring quality in addition to velocity? And I'm curious if it's something you've thought about.
Right, it's like the AI quality singularity, right? It's like AI creates the code, AI creates the PR, AI reviews the PR, AI pushes the PR to prod, AI runs tests in prod, AI monitors your code in prod, AI catches the fix, catches the bug, creates the alert, fixes it. Like, it's like, whatever. But if a human is going to use your product, a human at some point needs to do a quality check. A lot of bugs and issues are not actually technical, logical problems. It's that something is a bad user experience. And so, of course, yes, an AI can like assume what a bad user experience is. But I think as the surface area of products increase, there's still going to be moments where the quality check is basic stuff like, can users use this? Do they retain? Are they churning? It's still like normal business metrics.
Yeah, I'm going to give a hot take here, which is bad code rarely kills companies, but bad product definitely does. I mean, who here was personally victimized by US East 1 this week? Okay, yeah. AWS is going to survive that. Like, they're going to survive that. The bad code is not the problem. They have a compelling product. And so what I think about quality is ultimately I'm an optimist in that I think like more interesting things are going to be built that can solve real problems. We can solve performance, scalability, like, team ability to write the code and maintain the code. We solve all those problems on the back end. What you have to be really focused on from a quality perspective is like, do customers love it, use it, get value out of it? Can they see and feel and touch it? I think the stuff on the back end will be solved. That's my opinion.
I agree. I feel like if people are not like shouting from the rooftops about how great your product is, you probably don't have a high quality product.
Yeah.
And so like, I was at Stripe for a number of years, and we had this like a quality test where we would like, if you were working on like a product and it had a particular onboarding flow, like some engineer or designer on our team would go through the full onboarding flow and then like rate the quality on a scale of like, 1 to 10 or something like that. And I was just like, yeah, I guess so. Like that's nice. Like that's useful to have like someone with like a very keen eye who is a human being, and not AI. But at the same time, like I do think you need the like fervor and like love from customers that really goes alongside it.
Yeah. But I mean, Quinn, you've said that AI agentic coding is net negative for a lot of companies. So there is, I'm presuming you're saying from either a quality or velocity perspective, what's your view on quality?
Well, I think there's future costs that people will pay. And if you bring them forward, then it can be net negative. I think, though, with respect to an enterprise sales process, if you're trying to prove or measure the quality of your coding agent versus another, I've been there, done that, and it's basically impossible, and the decision is not actually made based on that, even though I understand why it's valuable. It's kind of like, what's the value of a company? Well, you could look at the share price, and, it's like that's a very distributed way of determining it. So it's really tough. Okay, well, you heard it here. Velocity, quality, free.
get a senator on your board. These are all the tips we have for building
Ex-senator.
good, productive enterprise companies. Thank you to my panelists, and thank you, everybody, for having us.